Going on, everyone? Cold Case Project back again, and today we're going to discuss a brand new, well, not really brand new. This cold case, we're actually going back some 47 years for this one. We're going to be discussing the Doodler, also referred to as the Black Doodler. This is 1974, so keep that in mind. The Black Doodler, who was a unidentified serial killer believed to be responsible for up to 16 murders and 3 assaults of men in San Francisco between January of 1974 to September of 1975. The nickname was given to the perpetrator's habit of sketching his victims prior to their sexual encounters and slaying of the victims, usually by stabbing. The perpetrator met his victims at gay bars and nightclubs. It's believed the Doodler killed between 5 to 16 men. A consistent method used several of the killings was by stabbing his victims in the front and back of their bodies at similar locations. All the victims were white males. Police theorized the victims all had died after meeting with the suspect near the locations where their bodies were recovered. The suspect was described as a man between 19 and 25 years of age of African descent. He was 6 feet tall with a slender build. Police initially believed there could have been as many as 3 different perpetrators during the early stages of the investigation. Now, our very first case that we're going to be going over with for the Doodler is going to be a man by the name of Gerald Kavanaugh. Now, Gerald Earl Kavanaugh, Canadian-American immigrant, is believed to be the Doodler's first victim. He was 49 years old at the time of his slaying, which had occurred by stabbing. Kavanaugh's fully clothed body was located on January the 24th, 1974, lying face up on Oceans Beach in San Francisco, California, in the early hours of the morning. He had died hours before. He was determined to have been conscious at the time he was killed and had attempted to resist the killer because he had multiple self-defense wounds. He initially remained unidentified, being temporarily known as John Doe 7 by the medical examiner. He was a single man, and few details are known about his personal life. Now, that said, the second known victim, the Doodler, was Joseph J. Stevens. Joseph Stevens, best known by the nickname Jay, was discovered on June the 25th, 1974, by a woman walking along the Spreckles Lake in San Francisco. Stevens was 27 years old and had died shortly before his body was found. He'd been witness at the club the previous day. He was employed as a female impersonator and comedian. Officers suspected that Stevens was alive at the time, and he had been at Spreckles Lake, possibly transporting himself to the area of the killer. Now, the known third victim of the Doodler is Klaus Christmann. Klaus Christmann, a German-American immigrant, was discovered by a woman walking her dog on July the 7th, 1974. His death had been somewhat more violent than previous murders because he'd considerably more stab wounds than Stevens and been slashed in his throat up, I believe, 3 times. The body was fully clothed. Christmann, unlike the previous victims, was married and had children. The fact that he had a makeup tube in his person when he died suggests to the police that he may have been a closeted gay man. He remained unidentified briefly while police were investigating the cases, which were believed were related to related after the third murder. He was buried in his native country of Germany. The fourth victim is Frederick Kappen. Frederick Elmer Kappen, age 32, was discovered on May the 12th, 1975 in San Francisco. He'd been stabbed like the other victims, dying from strikes to his aorta. It's believed his body had been moved approximately 20 feet after disturbances in the nearby sand nearby. Kappen was identified through fingerprints when these matched to those taken by the state due to his occupation as a nurse. He also served in the United States Navy, earning medals while serving in the Vietnam War. Now, the fifth known victim is Harold Gilberg, age 66. He was a Swedish American immigrant who was discovered on June the 4th, 1975, in a decomposed state after 2 weeks after his death in Lincoln Park. His remains slightly inconsistent with the other homicides because he was far older than the other victims. His underwear had been taken by his killer, and his pants were unzipped. Goldberg is believed to have been the final victim of the Doodler. While he remained unidentified, he was known briefly as John Doe 81. Now, police questioned the young man as a suspect in the case, but couldn't proceed with the criminal charges because the three surviving victims didn't want to out themselves by testifying against him in court. Among the stabbing survivors were a well-known entertainer and a diplomat. The suspect cooperated with police during his interview, but he never admitted guilt for the murders or attacks. Officers stated that they strongly believed that the man in question was responsible for the crimes, but he was never tried or convicted because of the survivors' refusals to appear in court. To date, the suspect never has been named publicly or apprehended. Very little information is available about the crimes. Two other suspects arose in 1997 after a pair of men from Redondo Beach were arrested in Riverside County, California, and questioned on suspicion of approximately 28 murders that, like the San Francisco killings, occurred after homosexual encounters. At the time, activist Harvey Milk publicly expressed very much empathy for the victims. At the time, he was also one of the few out politicians. I believe he was actually the first in California. I understand their position. I respect the pressure society has put on them, Milk elaborated. The three men likely feared damaging relationships with family and in the workforce, citing he believed 20 to 25% of the 85,000 gay men in San Francisco were closeted about their sexuality during this time span. Now, as of May of 2018, the case still remains open and ongoing with the San Francisco Police Department. Recent successes with DNA technology developed in recent decades since the crime have led to police to re-examine all the evidence. As of February of 2019, the police have offered a $100,000 award for any information leading to an arrest of the killer and released a brand new updated sketch showing what he would possibly look like today if he were still alive. They later announced they would consider forensic genetic genealogy, which also helped them nab suspect Joseph D'Angelo in the original Night Stalker case. Now, with all this said, we to this day have very little information on the Doodler. All we really have is he was at the time in 1974, he was a black man said to be between the age of 18 and 19, possibly to his mid 20s. So if he were still to be alive at oldest, he would probably be somewhere in his mid 60s. So, I mean, is it possible through DNA that we could possibly have a potential, solved murder like we did for the original Night Stalker? It's definitely possible. So, once again, with all this said, I do want us to take some time because, like I said, as we rewind back to the mid 70s, a lot of the media's coverage of these cases were so unempathetic, from making jokes to saying, was it Rock Hudson? Was it this guy? Was it, these gay entertainers? This was the world that we lived in the mid 70s. And unfortunately, this is what, a lot of these people had to deal with. So, as unfortunate as it is, this is all we have to identify who the doodler could be. So we can just pray and hope that one day DNA or genealogy can connect who the real man behind these murders was. So, with all that said, let's take our time to have a moment of silence for the five known and possible 11 other victims of the doodler. All right. Well, once again, thank you so much for tuning in. What are your thoughts on this case? Let me know in the comments down below. If you like this content, throw me a like, give me a subscribe, as I tell you to try to get new cold cases out for each and every day. Once again, thank you so much, and I will be talking to you again soon.